Hello, this is Gareth King continuing a series of short videos on loops within VBA. The next example we're going to look at, loop example set 2, is a program to calculate the factorial of a number n. Now the factorials can become very large numbers, because you're going, the factorial of 20 is 20 times 19 times 18 times 17 all the way down to 1. It's actually a huge number. Therefore, the actual program won't be able to handle any numbers greater than n equal to 20. I've already designed the form for you here. We have, this is the number that you're going to put in, text n, and the output is going to be in text factorial. This button here is called command loop 2. I could have called it command compute factorial, but I'm keeping the sequence going here, so I called it that. Okay, so if we go into the code here, here we have to dimension a few variables, so I'll dimension I as an integer. This will be to our loop variable, which we'll use to count through the loop, and capital N as an integer. In fact, I can leave that small n, that's fine. And then dimension factorial as a double. No, as an integer as well. Actually, sorry, I have to declare it as what's known as a long, because it's going to be huge numbers, so you have to declare it so that it can hold these very large numbers. An integer can only hold up to 36,000, so you have to declare it as long to be able to hold a very large number. And what we then do is, if you look at the code, the way it's going to work is the user is going to put in a value for n, so we have to read that in, and we're then going to use that with a loop to calculate the value of n factorial. So the first thing we need to do is we say n is equal to text n dot text. We read in the value of n from the text box, the value that the user puts in. Now, in most of the times this will work, but on some of the systems within the laboratory, it wasn't reading them incorrectly, so you can use this keyword or this function called val, and that will basically take the number that's put in as a string into the text box, and it'll convert it to a number that's stored within an integer variable. Okay, so the next thing we do is we say for I is equal to 1 to n, next n. So I always close off the loop first of all, and then I'll start the code. So that it's simple, one line. Factorial is equal to factorial multiplied by I. And when we run through the code, you'll see actually how it works. Then what I'm going to do is the answer I'm going to put out onto the text box which we have. So the answer will be output onto that text box. So the easiest way to show how it works is to run through it. And there's actually a fault with this. I'm just going to demonstrate it in a minute. I left the fault in on purpose just to demonstrate a point. If I go F8 here, I'll come down here first of all. I'll do print I factorial. Okay. At the moment there's nothing in those, so if I run through the program now, F8, it brings me out here. I put a value in here and I'll just say factorial of 5. I click in like so. Doesn't like something here. Oh, sorry, I should have said next I, not next n. So we start to step through it bit by bit. N is equal to val text n text. So if I just come here and I say print, I executed this statement, print I factorial, there's 0 at the moment, n has the value 5, so it's been read incorrectly. So if I then just come down here and delete those so we have it nice and clear, I put the cursor at the end of this line, and if I press enter, it'll execute the line, like so. Then I come and press F8. So we say for I is equal to 1 to n, the first time through that loop I has the value 1, and I say factorial is equal to factorial times I. Now if I print it off, the factorial is 0, but that doesn't make sense, because next time for the loop I should have the value 2. You can see it has the value 2 correctly, but factorial is still 0. And the one thing I forgot to do was I had to initialize factorial. And because I'm multiplying it, I initialize it to the value 1. Now what I can do here is I can come into the boundary on the left here and onto the marginal left, and I can click on that yellow arrow and bring it back up. If I do that, I can now execute it, and factorial now has the value 1. So you can see it has the value 1 here. If I start the loop, I'm going to clear this out now, and I'm going to do it again. If I start the loop, I go F8, and at the moment I has the value 1, factorial has the value 1. So I'm going to print the value of factorial, which is 1, by I, which is 1. So of course I should still have 1 and 1, yeah? Now I factorial is still 1. I now has become 2, so I'm going to multiply 2 by the existing value of factorial, which is 1. If I press enter, I is now 2, but factorial is now 2, because this line has been executed. If I come back up again, I now has the value 3. So if I print it off here, I has the value 3, factorial has the value 2, so we're going to multiply 2 by 3, so we should get 6 for the factorial. So I is still 3, it hasn't been incremented yet until it comes back up here, but factorial now is 6. So the factorial of 3 is 6. 3 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 1 is 6. Then we come around again, I is equal to 4, so if I print it off here, before we execute this statement, I has the value 4, the factorial has the value 6, so we're multiplying 6 by 4. If we press, that's now been executed, and you can see the factorial of 4 is 24. So now we're coming to last value. Remember we put in a value of 5 for n, so we now come to last value, and if I do it again, I is 5, factorial is 24, you multiply those two together and you get 120. So text, factorial text is equal to factorial, and if we go out and look, we'll see that the factorial of 5 is indeed 120. If I come here and do 10, calculate factorial, and I'll just press F5, you can see the factorial of 10 is a very large number. It's 3,628,800. If I go for 20, and the only reason I'm able to do this, I set the type as long, get a huge number there, and if I go for 21, it goes into the code and it says overflow, because basically the long value can't store a number bigger than that, bigger than the previous, the factorial of 20. So really what we should do is just make sure that when the user puts in the value, we should actually put a big if block around here and say if n is greater than 20, if n is less than or equal to 20, then we'll go ahead and calculate the factorial. Like so. I'll just indent everything, and maybe what I can do here is put a message box to say that message box n cannot be greater than 20. So you just give the user a message, but it won't go through the calculation and it won't come up with an error, because you want, when you design code, you want to avoid it going into, you want to avoid errors showing up to the user. You want to trap any errors, potential errors. So if I now run this, hopefully it'll work. I come in here, I do 20 factorial, it works fine. I do 21 now, let's see what happens. N cannot be 20, okay. Now I should have just put something in here to blank that actually as well, because it came up there. So if I just at the start of the program, I can just say text factorial, factorial, can't spell it there. Yes, there's a clear button there, and that was no clear, so what I can do is, that should work. So if I then run it like this, put in 20, no, that's not working, okay. The other way to do it is to say text is equal to, just open and close a quotation mark. Basically it's an empty character string. So that always works. So if I then run it, I have this here, and if I then go to 21, you can see it's cleared that at the very start, and it's coming up n cannot be 20, sorry, greater than 20, I should write in there. Okay. We'll close that there, n cannot be greater than 20. That might be, I'll use the greater than symbol because it won't fit in otherwise. Okay, so if we're run it this time, n is 21, n cannot be greater than 20, that's it. Okay, so I put in 20, and then we get the answer, the maximum value we can get the factorial of. Okay, thank you for listening.